South Wales, May 6th, 2001. 31-year-old Jason Williams hasn't been seen for 12 days.
And he certainly would have been in touch at least by phone.
Police arrest 2 men, secure witnesses, and obtain damning DNA evidence. But this is no open and shut case.
There was no body.
Could Jason still be alive? With the police unable to find him, his family turned to a local psychic. But will the hard science of the police or supernatural skills find Jason first? Lahore, a quiet commuter town on the south coast of Wales. A person doesn't have to be missing for very long before somebody notices. Unemployed father Jason Williams has not been seen for 4 days. His sister Julie is worried by his lack of contact.
Jason was a very family-orientated person, very devoted to his son. He was very much a hands-on dad. He certainly would have been in touch at least by phone to speak to his son. So that was when the alarm bells first were raised.
Detective Chief Inspector Ken Isaac has lived and worked in the area for most of his life. An area where serious crime is extremely rare.
A missing person report in relation to Jason Williams commenced in the village of Lahore. There were general house-to-house investigations and speaking to his family and associates. So we expected from an early stage of the missing person inquiry that he would be found within a week or so.
Most missing persons in the UK are found within 3 days. After a week, the police still have no definite leads. The family grows desperate.
Leaving messages on his mobile phone for him. Obviously, every time the phone rings, you wonder, is it the police ringing with news?
But everybody kept an open mind that perhaps he's gone visiting somebody out of the area.
After 9 days and with little information from the police, Julie takes advice from a relative and contacts psychic Sue Evans to see if her worst fears are true.
Psychics have the ability to speak to spirit, so that if that missing person is dead, then psychics would be able to communicate with that dead spirit.
If she was a genuine article and could do what she said she could do, she might come up with a piece of information that would lead to finding him, so there wasn't any decision to make, really.
Right then.
Sue claims that tarot cards focus her psychic intuition and will allow her to discover what happened to Jason.
I use the tarot like some people use a crystal ball or tea leaves. And it's a way of me linking into their lives and finding out what's happened to them. To me, the tarot is how I communicate with spirit, as well as being able to predict.
Out of the 78 picture cards, Sue turns over the image that most strikes fear into those not familiar with the tarot, the death card.
The death card means change. Doesn't always mean death, but it does mean change. But because it's next to the moon, which indicates sadness to me, it does mean that there is sad changes around you. This is the Chariot, which means trauma. This is how you feel at the minute, as if everything has tumbled down around you, which is caused by all these preceding cards. And this is the 9 of swords, which indicates stress to come along with this. The cards did show us that there was trauma around Jason, but we weren't absolutely positive as to what had happened. But it does indicate that something has happened. So we'll have to remote view this if you want at a later stage.
Usually if people have, as she put it, gone over, she can pick them up fairly quickly. But I think you are always aware as well that there are charlatans out there that will prey on people's grief and make claims that are not true.
You know, it's not going to be cut and dried. It's one of those situations that it may take a while to get to the bottom of.
Sue says she can sense a disturbance around Jason, but is unable to contact him in the spirit world. This is a ray of hope to Julie that her brother may not be dead after all. 12 days after his disappearance, Sue tries to contact Jason again. She figures that where one psychic has failed, 2 will succeed. She calls upon her sister Kathleen.
We're asking Spirit to help us to find what happened to Jason.
Sue uses remote viewing, an unproven phenomenon that psychics claim allows them to witness events from a spirit's point of view.
We ask for protection and a gold light around us to help us work.
When I remote view, it's like watching a video or a television. You see details. You can see the layout of furniture, you can see the layout of rooms, you can pick up the atmosphere, which would lead up to a murder. You can then watch as if you're standing there as a witness.
Sue claims she is transported back to the murder scene with Jason as her spirit guide.
I found myself in a living room, and there was an older gentleman there and a younger gentleman, as well as Jason.
I see that there's a bit of agitation going on between Jason and the younger man.
What the psychic doesn't know is that her visions seem to match details revealed by a local man who has been brought in by police after claiming he witnessed the murder.
This started as a missing person investigation, and I always kept an open mind. Is this a missing person investigation, or is this a murder case?
Alan Sinfield says he was there when Jason was viciously attacked by 27-year-old Richard Davis.
Sinfield and Jason were friends. There was a vast age difference, some 20 years. What he told us is that they'd been drinking at his house. Davis and Williams had an argument over the fact that Davis saw Jodie Sinfield's telephone number in Jason Williams's phone.
All of a sudden it erupted like a balloon going pop. And there was a struggle.
Davis pulled Jason Williams onto the floor, straddled him.
And he was just sticking the knife in him in his chest and things in some kind of a vengeful, nasty way.
With no apparent knowledge of Sinfield's confession, Sue describes an older man and a younger man in the room with Jason, then a drunken murder. She has no doubts what this information is all about. Jason wants to ensure his killer is brought to justice.
There is an element of wanting justice done because somebody had taken his life.
It's 12 days since 31-year-old Jason Williams was last seen alive in Lahore, South Wales. This missing persons case takes a dramatic turn when a 57-year-old local man, Alan Sinfield, is interviewed by police.
This was turned into a murder investigation, primarily from the disclosure by Sinfield to the police saying that Richard Davis had killed Jason Williams, and he was a party to the disposal of his body.
For 24 hours, these details are not released even to Jason's family, yet somehow psychic Sue Evans' vision of the murder appears to match Sinfield's confession. The police remain open-minded over what has happened to Jason.
And we weren't sure at that stage, was he involved in the murder? Did he alone do the murder and blame Richard Davis? And they were things that we were hoping to clarify. Richard Davis was also arrested that night, and he was given an opportunity to give his version of events.
Davis protests his innocence and claims that although he had an argument with Jason, he left Sinfield's house with him still alive.
The interviewing officers felt it was a challenge, as if it was some type of game with him, or challenging the officers during each particular interview.
The police act fast and send in forensic teams to Sinfield's house. Now, both Ken Isaacs and Sue have terrible news to deliver.
One of the most difficult jobs for me was speaking to the family and telling them that he had been killed.
Initially, when we heard that he'd, been stabbed, it happened like probably 2 streets from where I lived. It was very strange to think that all that was going on in such a short distance from your home and you didn't know anything about it. We knew that these people had been charged with his murder, and I didn't feed that information to Sue, because if I did that, I would never be able to know whether she was genuine or not.
I have to tell you that I have been in contact with Jason's spirit. and I feel he has passed over. I'm sorry to have to tell you.
Sue tells Julie about her vision of Jason being in a room with two men and the drunken stabbing. Her details match the facts that the police have revealed to Julie earlier.
With regard to the information she's come up with, the accuracy of it, I can't logically tell you how she could come up with all those details.
Jason's spirit also seems to be providing Sue with more clues that could bring his killer to justice.
And Jason was pointing out that there would have been parts of the room splattered by the blood, and some had splattered onto a radiator.
With regard to the information she's come up with, the accuracy of it, I can't logically tell you how she could come up with all those details.
We need to see now what's happened to him since.
Julie is won over and approaches the police about working with the psychic, but they refuse the offer.
My take on the psychic involvement is that a psychic did not assist the investigation, and to my knowledge, South Wales Police has not used a psychic to help to prove any inquiry.
Yeah, I think, police have their hands tied by procedure, by budgets, by professional guidelines and standards. I mean, families are not tied by any of those things.
Frustrated by the police's response, Sue and Julie launch their own psychic hunt for the body, led by the spirit of Jason.
The key to any murder investigation is identifying where is the attack site and where is the body deposition site. We had an attack site, but we didn't initially have the body deposition site.
Without a body, the police could not be confident of convicting anyone for murder. At Sinfield's house, the forensic team have a breakthrough.
If we moved back the carpet, and we found there was two large pools of blood, and under the radiator were some small dots of blood.
Sue claims she predicted there would be blood close to a radiator. For her believers, this is proof that the psychic has access to the world of the paranormal. Psychometry is a controversial technique that supposedly allows seers to explore psychic imprints of objects touched by victims. Will this help Sue find Jason's body? She calls in her psychic troops.
Take a deep breath in.
We were asked to sit within the circle, and then I think a photograph and some things of Jason's, like a T-shirt, were passed around.
It helps when you have more people in circle, because each person's got a different psychic ability. So all these combined builds up the whole picture. So we saw that the body had been loaded into a van and taken up towards the Brecon Beacons. We saw the body being left very unceremoniously, but there was a tree that the branch of a tree had broke.
Are we anywhere near where your body is?
Jason showed us a Celtic cross. The unique thing about it is that he said there were 3 of these crosses.
And she said, this is near the spot where he was put.
I just keep saying it's so obvious. You're missing me.
Near there, that's where his body was.
South Wales, May 2001. The race to find the body of murder victim Jason Williams is on. Police detain 2 local men, Alan Sinfield and Richard Davis. Sinfield has pointed the finger at Davis, but he maintains his innocence. Whatever they say may be irrelevant. DCI Ken Isaac knows that without Jason's body, a murder conviction is practically impossible.
It was important for us to recover Jason's body for 2 reasons. Primarily, to prove the case of murder. There's been very few convictions or murder convictions where a body hasn't been recovered. And secondly, for the family, so they could have closure on the case.
At the same time, psychic Sue Evans has launched her own search. She claims that she is in touch with the spirit of Jason, and he has given her clues that will lead to the location of his body.
Where we were in terms of the jigsaw at this stage was that we had more pieces to put together to build the whole picture. We needed to know where the body might be to help find Jason.
Jason's sister is convinced by Sue's powers and asks the police to use her supernatural skills. But in the UK, busy murder investigation teams often discount the work of psychics. While Sue and Julie embark on their own hunt for more clues, the police act upon Sinfield's admission that he helped Davis dispose of the body.
Following Richard Davis killing Jason Williams, they wrapped his body up in black plastic bags. And he and Sinfield went around the Brecon Beacons looking for a place to dispose of Jason's body.
Assigned this near impossible task of finding Jason's body in over 500 square miles of moorland is search expert John Williams.
The area is so big. Unless we had some indication as to where Jason was, then we were literally clutching at straws.
What the police have that Sue doesn't is the help of one of the men who dumped Jason's body.
We drove quite a few hundred miles over the days I was with him. I can recall him saying that they drove onto a grass verge at some point. And on my left-hand side, I could see some tyre marks that were on the grass verge. I looked further along the road from where the tyre marks were, and I could see a white bag. On top of the bag, there was a stone. And it just seemed strange. This was in the middle of nowhere. There was absolutely nothing about, and why is a stone suddenly being put on top of a carrier bag?
Sue's psychic investigation has already shown her Jason's body dumped on the Brecon Beacons. Will her visions of Celtic crosses and a broken tree turn out to be meaningful?
The first thing I saw at this point, I could see that this area was flattened, and that was quite obvious. You could then see the tree trunk here, and you could see that some bark was removed from the main sort of trunk area. It just looked as if somebody put their foot in it. I was more than satisfied that this was a scene, more than satisfied.
As Sue predicted, it seems that Jason has been dumped near a broken tree. Now police meticulously search for his body or further evidence.
It was literally a shoulder-to-shoulder, slow-time search from the roadway into where I felt Jason was placed.
We'd heard that they'd actually sealed off an area in Brecon and forensic teams were searching it.
For 12 hours, police search experts painstakingly examine an area that is almost the size of a football pitch. Miraculously, they discover a human hair.
He came up trumps because his hair was found interwoven with grass and bracken. For that particular scene, to find his hair was fantastic.
I think at that point we were hoping that they would find him.
The hair is sent off for DNA testing to secure a match with Jason. After 24 hours of searching, the police are forced to acknowledge the worst.
There was no body. I carried a cursory search, but there was no body.
It was quite frustrating, really, when they came away empty-handed.
Amazingly, Sue's vision of the broken tree has turned out to be accurate, but somebody has been back to the site and Jason's body is gone. Without it, a murder conviction is a near impossible task for the police. Over the following months, the police scour the Brecon Beacons using helicopters, dive teams, and sniffer dogs, every method available to them, except the powers of a psychic. Julie believes that where the police have failed, Sue will succeed.
I feel it's definitely near these 3 Celtic crosses. So we decided to go in the car and go up and have a look for ourselves to see if we could find any of these landmarks that Jason was showing us.
As we were driving along, we rounded a corner and I spotted a church behind some high sort of conifer trees.
And we found a Celtic cross. There was a Celtic cross there.
And as we approached it, I noticed that I could just see a Celtic cross in the grounds, and I said to Sue, there's one Celtic cross there.
Julie turned on and said, look behind, and there was 2 other Celtic crosses. So these were the 3 Celtic crosses we felt that Jason was showing us. The clues and the jigsaws were coming together, and we just had to trust that he'd guide us to him.
In South Wales, 2 very different investigations race to find the body of murder victim Jason Williams. The police search the Brecon Beacons but find no corpse. Jason's sister Julie turns to psychic Sue Evans. She is certain that Jason will be found near the 3 Celtic crosses. crosses that they have discovered in an old Welsh churchyard.
The fact that we actually found 3 Celtic crosses in one churchyard, which I think is quite unusual anyway.
You could feel his spirit around you, and you would feel a nice warmth.
I thought about it, and I really can't think how logically she could come up with as much accurate information as she has.
I would never have known these were here, and I do feel that Jason did draw us towards these to show he's in this area.
Sue is certain that Jason is nearby. Julie supplies the police with the psychic's vision, but they prefer not to act on information allegedly from beyond the grave.
So I'm used to them being skeptical. I'm used to not being acknowledged by some of them, even when what I've set out to do has happened. But I feel Julie did feel a lot of frustration because she'd be going there and saying, well, look, we're doing this, we're doing that, why aren't you helping?
The police have the confession of Sinfield and strong evidence pointing towards Davis as the murderer. But without Jason's body, taking Davis to court is risky. A conviction secured without a body is virtually unprecedented.
My understanding that there's been less than a dozen convictions in British judicial history, or it was at that stage, for a conviction of murder without a body. So we were mindful of that.
The police meticulously piece together a package that aims to prove that Jason is dead even without his body. It includes vital information from the crime scene.
We got an interpretation to the blood. There was a large pool of blood, so anyone who would have lost that amount of blood would have been seriously ill at that particular time. So that helped to support the fact that Jason Williams didn't leave the scene that night.
The hair discovered in the forest comes back with a DNA match with Jason. What Sinfield was saying all along seems to be true. Then detectives interview Davy's girlfriend, Jody Sinfield, and she confirms that he admits to stabbing Jason. The police decide to gamble on the skills of their forensic team, and in February 2002, Davis and Sinfield are put in front of a court of law. Sue's claims that she has spoken to the spirit world will also be put to the test.
It was spooky, for want of a better word. As I say, when certain things were coming up, you could actually feel the hairs on the back of your neck going up.
Julie claims that Sue continued to provide her family with visions of the murder, including details of the part that Davis played, the nature of the attack, and how Jason's body was moved. Now this information corresponds with what Julie hears in court.
They realised that a lot of the information that I'd given them was accurate, bang on. This proved that I was on the right track all the way through. Julie did go back to see the police and say, well, Sue had told us all this before it came out, and yet you still refused to let her in on this.
The thorough police investigation leaves no room for doubt. Sinfield gets 2 years for perverting the course of justice. Richard Davis is found guilty of Jason Williams' murder and sentenced to life. He continues to appeal against this judgment.
We were satisfied and pleased, obviously, with the fact that we had done a thorough investigation. But my thoughts are with the family of Jason Williams.
It's over 4 years since the trial. Jason still has no grave. His grieving family can only pay their respects at a memorial near the site where he was originally dumped.
Jason seems to have accepted things a lot better as the years have gone on. He seems to have a little bit more acceptance of what's happened to him, but the drive is just as strong. He still wants us to find his body. He's still around us, and he is only a thought away, and he pops into my mind quite often, quite regular.
Sue is certain that Jason is near the 3 crosses, and with police help she could find his body, but the controversy over the intervention of psychics and clairvoyants in criminal investigations remains.
Well, I feel that psychics are another tool that the police can use. I would like to see every police headquarters having psychics on their books.
It's nice to see Callum's dog is still here.
Oh, bless.
Yes, Callum's little dog. Because obviously he has no grave to go to.
No. It's a little present for his father.
Mm. I think she's been psychic from a child. To her, that is normal, and I get the impression she can't understand why we find it so amazing, because for her, it's fact.
Sue's relationship with Jason has had a lasting effect on her.
It proves that there's life after death, and it proves that your loved ones care for you after they've died, and that they still have emotions and feelings even though they're dead. I will always keep looking for him, and I will always be there for him for as long as I can.
December 1998, Lindsay Quai vanishes on Christmas Day. A police missing persons inquiry fails and a family is torn apart. But a visitor from beyond the grave appears to a psychic in a nightmarish vision.
She told me she'd been carnaged and mangled. She was trying to tell us that she'd been brutally murdered. Then she flashed the railway line. I could see the railway track, and I feel that's where she was telling me this was where she had been killed. And it was for me to go and help her.
Is Lindsay missing, or is she dead? And can a psychic discover the truth behind her disappearance? Southport, northwest England, deserted now, but every summer this seaside town attracts millions of visitors. Most come to breathe in the sea air, stretch out on the miles of empty beaches and enjoy the thrills of the roller coaster. But this man is no tourist. He is psychic Joe Power, and he's been drawn here by a missing girl and a nightmare he will never forget. The story starts here in December 1998. Lindsay Quai is a 21-year-old wife and mother of 2 small children.
Lindsay was a very kind person, do anything for anybody. Good mother.
The Quais are just an average family preparing for the holidays, but on Christmas Day 1998, their lives change forever when Lindsay mysteriously vanishes. Days turn into weeks, and weeks turn into months, and still nobody hears from Lindsay. Her family begin to suspect that something is very wrong.
Well, you know, anyone goes missing in your family, it's just undescribable, the feelings you get. Everyone was worrying, and our brains were going, swirling, we weren't sleeping, we weren't eating. It was just a great worry.
In February, Southport police take a statement from Lindsay's distraught husband, Mitchell.
He said that she'd gone out drinking with her friends and that she'd stayed out all night, and he'd been left alone with the 2 children in the house and had woken with them on his own on Christmas Day, and went on to say that Lindsay had arrived later on the Christmas morning, still under the influence of drink, went into a shower, didn't say anything, got a few clothes together, and then left without saying anything to the children. Sometime in the January, he'd seen her in a vehicle with a guy who he didn't know, at a junction in Southport somewhere, and he presumed that she'd just started a new life.
Since then, nobody has seen or heard from Lindsay. Police class her as a missing person, and working with her husband Mitchell, start a high-profile nationwide appeal for her return.
We had a press conference, which he attended, and he reiterated the story that he'd given to the police.
When she came in the morning, she was out of her face. She came in at 7 o'clock in the morning. She went straight up to bed, and I got the kids up then, opened the presents up. She showed no kind of interest in the kids on Christmas Day. We'd had trouble in our relationship, and we decided to separate before Christmas. But we were going to stay together through Christmas. I thought I was going to leave after New Year, but she's up and left before then.
Lindsay's father, Peter Wilson, makes an appeal to his daughter.
I just say, you know, if Lindsay's watching this, no one's blaming her for what she's done, you know, leaving the children. And we'd like to contact the police as soon as possible.
Psychic Joe Power has been following the case in the press, but late one night in February, he has a nightmare that he thinks is a message from the spirit world.
I'd gone to sleep. It was like any ordinary night. During my sleep, I heard a phone ring and 2 people appeared to me.
Joe recognizes the woman from the newspapers as housewife Lindsay Quai, but police think she is a missing person. Joe claims that the spirit of Lindsay is trying to tell him she's been murdered, who her killer is, and where to find her body.
Lindsay Quai told me she had been carnaged and mangled.
Joe's vision is incredibly violent and shocks him to this day.
And then she told me for the police to search the railway, and also as well, the police must search the fairgrounds.
But why did Lindsay want these 2 areas searched? As the images intensify, Joe receives more information.
I heard McDowell's, and I actually seen McDowell's, so I was hearing it and I was seeing it. And I also heard her say tractors.
Joe is confused and distressed by his vision. He turns to friend, retired police support worker Frida Valentine for advice.
He started telling me that he'd been visited by Lindsay Quai in a dream, and she said, please help me. I am desperate for somebody to recognise that I have been murdered. I am not a missing person.
Frida is shocked by what Joe tells her.
I think he really believed that she had been cut up, with him saying about the mangled carnage. It more or less looked as though they couldn't see or recognise any parts of the body.
Joe also tells Frida where he thinks Lindsay might be buried.
He told me that he'd been shown the railway track and also the fairground in Southport. I suggested to Joe that he go to the police and give all this information.
Reluctantly, Joe follows Frida's advice.
I was absolutely terrified going into a police station. I thought they would think I was the murderer, going in with so much detailed and accurate information.
But no detectives from the Missing Persons Inquiry team is available, so Joe gives a full statement to another officer.
And she reassured me that that information would be passed on to the officers in charge.
If information comes in from a psychic or a medium that we feel can be corroborated or will send us in a certain direction, then my view is that we will always utilise that if it helps us. But the problem with that is that quite often it's not supported by any tangible evidence.
Joe never hears back from the police regarding his statement. As far as they're concerned, this is still a missing persons case.
Well, it was very frustrating to me because at that time I knew this was a murder case and not a missing persons.
Joe is determined to discover more about Lindsay Quai's mysterious disappearance. Has she been killed? Was she buried in the fairground or the railway? And could Joe convince the police Lindsay is not a missing person and a killer is walking free? A young mother, Lindsay Quai, has gone missing. Police have no clue to her whereabouts. Her husband has appealed for her safe return, but in a terrifying vision, psychic Joe Power sees a woman being killed and dismembered. Is this Lindsay? Should police be hunting a murderer? Joe is determined to find out.
I felt I had to investigate this case myself because the police were not listening, and I felt I had a sense of duty to get this young lady's remains found.
Joe drives to Southport. He has no map and he doesn't know the area. All he has is his confusing list of locations from Lindsay. The railway, the fairground, McDowell's, and a tractor yard. After hours in the car, Joe is tired and lost. He's convinced his psychic connection to Lindsay has failed until he reaches a certain road completely by chance.
It was just around this part here that I heard a voice crystal clear, and a sudden noise shouted, "Stop!" And I turned to the right, pulled up the car, and for no apparent reason at all, is that the car horn started to go off. I got out of the car, pulled the bonnet, eventually it went off.
And I got back in the car and I decided, with the car horn going off, that I'd get away from the area because of the neighbours and the sound, and I felt really quite frightened at that stage.
And I drove around on the next street. But just before I'd actually got to the bottom of the road, there was a place called McDowell's that was on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side was another place full of tractors.
That's when it all sunk into me that this is where she had actually sent me.
Both the tractor yard and McDowell's are on Stamford Road, the very road where Lindsay lived with husband Mitchell and her 2 children. Joe is now convinced that the woman who appeared to him was Lindsay Quai. But why is she drawing him here?
After I left the area, I felt shocked, I felt disturbed, but I also felt, it's strange to say this, is reassurance in the images that I had actually received.
Once again, Joe decides to contact the police. This time, he writes a letter to the head of the missing person investigation, Bob Marsden.
I wrote to Bob Marsden and told him that I was no ordinary person. I was doing this because this young lady had appeared to me, and this case needs to be looked at in more detail.
Joe receives this receipt for his letter, but the police do not call.
I believe Joe was getting very, very frustrated because he'd informed all the police, and yet they still believed that she was actually missing.
Sometime after Joe's letter arrived at Southport Police Headquarters, a review of the missing persons inquiry is ordered. Detective Superintendent Jeff Sloan is brought in to re-examine all the evidence. Immediately, his instincts as a police officer tell him something is not right.
There was a lot of circumstantial evidence which tended towards the fact that Lindsay was not alive. We couldn't establish any proof of life.
Lindsay hasn't used her bank account since before Christmas. She hasn't applied for income support or housing benefit. Vital medical appointments have been missed, and she has had no contact with her family, not the actions of either a runaway or a loving mother.
When I read through the documents and I read through the lifestyle and some of the issues that emanated from that missing from home inquiry, I formed the opinion quite quickly that this actually should be a murder inquiry. I felt that Lindsay had been murdered.
Joe Power is no longer alone in his belief that Lindsay has been killed.
It's very frustrating, you know, knowing that this young lady had been cornered and mangled, and you have to sit there and wait for her to be found.
Detective Superintendent Jeff Sloan is placed in charge of the new murder inquiry, but this isn't going to be an easy case to crack.
It's very frustrating not to have a body because when you have a body, that's where your lines of inquiry start to develop. All we had was 22 Stamford Road, which was Lindsay's home address, where she'd lived with Mitchell. Well, the very first thing that we do is to go back and fully search the house again, the gardens and the area immediately surrounding the house.
Using the house as their starting point, the police begin one of the largest searches ever conducted in mainland England.
And we actually used officers from the Royal Air Force, the JARIC, which is a reconnaissance organisation, who flew over and could detect any recently disturbed ground. And if they highlighted any areas, then we would send a specialist search team to go and excavate.
It's an agonizing time for Lindsay's family.
We're by the phone 24/7, and sometimes we get false information where bones had been found at one time. And we were given the information, then we found out it was a pig, a dead pig. And then when you heard about a body being found and this, that and the other, one was found in the River Ribble, I think, you wondered if that was Lindsay. It's never ending.
But the police failed to find any evidence of Lindsay.
I was concerned that we hadn't found a body, and I was at a loss as to where we would look to next, and took the decision that we wouldn't undertake any more searches or digging until it was based on intelligence that we had through. But it was frustrating for me.
The police are forced to suspend all searches, but Lindsay's parents refuse to give up hope They spend every waking moment looking for their daughter.
Well, we searched in canals, rivers, we got stung by bees, hornets, you name it, but, you know, I used to be up to my neck sometimes in freezing cold water. We couldn't stop, it was just our way of contributing towards finding Lindsay.
With the police search on hold and no new information coming forward, it looks as if Lindsay's body may never be found and the case remain unsolved. But Psychic Joe Power believes this is something the spirit world would never allow. Joe thinks Lindsay's spirit is unable to rest, as once again she appears to him with a message from beyond the grave.
The second time Lindsay appeared to me was at my home address, and she came to me and told me that the police were not listening to the information that I had previously provided to them.
Joe's first vision led him to Lindsay's house. Now he returns to Southport to search the fairground and railway track. He has a feeling that these areas are in some way connected to her disappearance. He starts at the railway track. Joe doesn't know what he should be looking for. He's hoping his psychic powers will be his guide.
When I walked along this particular part of the railway line, my hair stood up on my hand and I heard a voice. I believe that was Lindsay telling me is that she was in this location.
But if Lindsay is buried at the railway, why does Joe want the police to search the fairground as well?
It was quite clear to me is that this young lady's remains were in two separate locations.
But Joe Power fails to find any evidence that Lindsay is in this location. For Detective Superintendent Sloan, the case is equally baffling, with no new leads coming in. He decides to re-examine the original witness testimonies. He wants to build a picture of Lindsay's last known movements.
We believe Lindsay had been shopping on the 15th of December and had actually made a call to the benefits agency, and she made an inquiry about a missing cheque, which should have been issued in the November. As a result of that conversation, she was sent out a disclaimer form, which was never ever received and never ever recovered by the police. It was after that phone call, basically, that Lindsay ceased to exist.
Detective Superintendent Sloan discovers that the only person who claims to have seen Lindsay alive after December 16th was her husband, Mitchell Quai. He told police she left him and abandoned her children on Christmas Day. Detective Superintendent Sloan is suspicious. He has a feeling Mitchell's statement doesn't ring true. It doesn't fit with the profile he has built of Lindsay.
Given the background of Lindsay, what her upbringing was, the way she was interacted with her children, that there was no way she would have walked out on her children on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day.
Police take a closer look at Lindsay and Mitchell's relationship.
Mitchell was very violent towards Lindsay over a number of years, and ultimately she did try to institute divorce proceedings from him. But the issue was then that she'd always accepted Mitchell back and they'd always be reconciled.
Could Mitchell really be her killer? Was this why Lindsay's spirit led Joe to her road? Was she trying to tell him that this was the murder scene? It's been 9 months since Lindsay Quai disappeared in Southport, northwest England. Detective Superintendent Jeff Sloan believes that Lindsay has been murdered, just as Psychic Joe Power said over 7 months earlier. Joe's nightmarish vision had started a psychic investigation that took him to Southport Fairground, the railway track, and Lindsay's own home. But what significance do these locations have? All is to be revealed as police close in on their prime suspect, Lindsay's husband, Mitchell Quai.
Well, Mitchell portrayed an image of he was the abandoned father, the abandoned husband, and that, sadly for us, he was very plausible in front of the media. He was very confident, overconfident sometimes. He seemed to be reaching out to the community, and a lot of people seemed to be believing him and formed the opinion that perhaps the police were just picking him out because he seemed the obvious candidate for a suspect.
In June 2000, Detective Superintendent Jeff Sloan trusts his instincts and arrests Mitchell Quai on suspicion of murdering his 21-year-old wife, Lindsay.
Well, Mitchell was an egotist, and I actually felt that he formed the opinion that he could get away with this because of the time element and the fact that the media had shown such an interest in him, and various members of the community were sympathetic to him.
But despite hours of questioning, Mitchell refuses to crack. Detective Superintendent Sloan is convinced that he has his man, but he doesn't have enough evidence to press charges. It looks like Mitchell is about to walk.
Basically stuck to his story, but when we listened to the interviews, his responses and his replies, I got from the psychologist that we were starting really to get to him, and he was becoming quite low and down in this. And I think the telling point came when I gave instructions within his hearing that his father was to be charged, and so was his brother.
Phone records show that at key points in the investigation, Mitchell made an unusually large number of calls to his brother Elliot and his father. This was totally out of character, and Detective Superintendent Sloan thought it pointed to their involvement.
The arrest of Elliot and the subsequent arrest of Mitchell's father had quite a pronounced impact on Mitchell, because I think he felt that he'd actually succeeded in convincing members of the public, the press, and to a certain degree the police, that he was right and that Lindsay had just disappeared. He thought it would go away. And I got the impression that when he realised that we did mean business and that they too had been arrested, that reality started to creep in, and the realisation was that he wasn't going to get away with it. I made the decision that I was going to charge Mitchell with murder, and within a very, very short space of time, I was contacted on my mobile to tell me that Mitchell had actually admitted that he had in fact killed Lindsay.
Over a year after Lindsay Quai first went missing, the truth surrounding her disappearance is finally uncovered.
The last few hours of Lindsay's life all centred around the cheque that had gone missing in November. Mitchell, at some stage, had tried to encash that cheque. There's a row developed over that, and he's lost his control and he strangled her.
As Mitchell's confession continues, the true horrific nature of the crime is revealed.
And that's when he recruited Elliot to come in and to help him to dispose of the body. And that's when he decided that he and Elliot would cut the body up in the bath with the children asleep in bed in the next room, which I thought was horrific.
The images of violence in Joe's dream were now explained. Lindsay was dismembered, just as Joe had said. And the scene of the crime? Lindsay's house on Stamford Road, the very place Joe had been led to 12 months earlier. How did he know these facts?
I knew 100% I'd been right all the time. It was a very emotional case and a very upsetting case.
Mitchell Quai leads police officers to the locations where he buried his wife's remains.
Lindsay's torso was found near to the Pleasureland theme park at Southport, behind a go-kart racing track where Mitchell used to work. We found Lindsay's legs on the railway embankment, which was near to one of the first places they resided together.
Joe had asked for these locations to be searched over 12 months earlier.
I knew straight away. It didn't come as a surprise for me. What you've got to remember is how powerful these images, what she had shown to me. She'd already shown me the fairground. She'd shown me the railway.
But unfortunately for Joe, at that time he was working alone. He never did receive the call to help the police. But Joe believes there is one person who recognizes the part he played in this case.
Lindsay briefly appeared to me after her remains were actually found, and I heard her say thank you, and there was no more contact from this young lady.
On January 16th, 2001, Mitchell Quai is sentenced.
Mitchell was sentenced to a mandatory life term of imprisonment with a tariff of 18 years because of the severity of the way it disposed of his wife, Lindsay.
Elliot Quai receives 7 years for his part in the gruesome murder. Mitchell's father is released without charge.
This case was extremely difficult to crack, not least because of the way that she was murdered, the way she was disposed of, and the way that he behaved after the murder, actually actively seeking the press and seeking public opinion on his side and sympathy.
Detective Superintendent Sloan receives a special commendation for the integral part he played in the capture and conviction of this most devious of killers. Joe Power's personal investigation is as yet unrecognized.
When the killers were caught, I was very satisfied that I'd done my job. All the detail and all the information that had been provided made me feel very, very satisfied, not only just for me, but for Lindsay Quai's parents as well. It was a very emotional case and a very upsetting case.
To lose Lindsay that way has affected everybody, the whole family, me included. Never going to be the same again. Still suffering now. We'll be suffering until the day we die. Peter, my eldest son, hung himself in the loft at my house. Could never get over the fact of what they did to Lindsay after they'd murdered her. That's what led to his suicide.
2 years after her vicious murder, Lindsay is finally able to rest in peace. But she leaves behind a family torn apart by tragedy.
Mitchell's taken my daughter. He's taken Robin and Jack's mother. He's taken my son, Peter, because I blame him for that as well. He's taken a lot off the family, which we'll never forgive him for.
Pub landlord Mick Hughes is ferociously attacked in the living quarters above his bar. He's battered and beaten over the head and left bleeding to die. After hundreds of hours of investigation, the police are baffled. They just don't have enough evidence to make an arrest.
There was a feeling of a marathon about that inquiry.
Local psychic Angela McGee visits the scene of the crime.
I could see a vision of Mick's body lying under the window. Actually could see his injuries.
Her spirit allies show her the terrible truth.
I got this awful shudder through me. And I realised then that I was actually looking at the culprit.
Can Angela's supernatural visions help bring the brutal killer to justice? Sunday, April 27th, 2003. Police race towards the quiet village of Pelsall near Birmingham, towards the Royal Oak pub. Staff arriving for work have found the body of the landlord, Mick Hughes, brutally bludgeoned to death. Detective Inspector Ian Bamber and Detective Constable Mike Crump have the job of catching the killer.
Mick's body was found in his private bedroom area that was on the first floor of the pub.
He had sustained serious head injuries consistent with him being struck with an object.
The attack had been ferocious, sustained, and really malicious. If offenders had meant to incapacitate him, to render him unconscious or knock him out, you could have easily done that with 1 or 2 blows. But no, they hit him again and again and again. The bedroom upstairs where Mick slept was ransacked.
All the early indications suggested was that it had been a burglary that had gone drastically wrong.
Michael Hughes was a family man, just 2 months away from his 60th birthday. His daughter Sharon is devastated by the news.
You see it on TV, but until you've actually lived it, You can't describe how it destroys you as a person and as a family. You really can't. They asked me and my sister if we could go down to the morgue and identify my dad's body. It was the worst thing I've ever had to do in my life.
Sharon and her family are desperate for justice. But despite weeks of intensive forensic investigation and hundreds of interviews with local people, the police cannot find any conclusive evidence. A neighboring publican decides to call in psychic medium Angela McGee.
I had a phone call from a friend and she asked me to go down to help with the local murder. And my reaction was, what if they don't believe, you know? I'm not going to go down there and look stupid. I said, I'll wait till I get a message through spirit. I'll wait till the right moment.
Within days, that moment comes.
Well, I had a message from my own father in spirit. It was him that actually told me to go. He said, what about this murder? What about this murder? And then I knew I had to go. I believe that mediumship, you are an instrument of the spirit world. It's not voluntary. You just do what you have to do.
Angela drives to the Royal Oak pub. She's never been here before and knows nothing about the murder, but that is about to change.
I sat there in meditation for a little while, said my prayers, and put my hands up and said, dear God, what have I got to tell these people? With that, I had a vision. I saw 3 men climbing up a black fire escape staircase, over the roof, over the railings, and in through the French windows. And I thought to myself, that is where they've got in this building.
Emboldened by her vision, Angela decides to go in. She is greeted by Beryl Chapman, former partner of Mick Hughes, who is looking after the Royal Oak. Beryl shows Angela to the living quarters of the pub. She stands in the hall. Then suddenly she is shown a second vision.
I could see bodies struggling, as if there was a real push-pull-you type thing going on, and there was blood. It was just a flash, literally a flash, a vision.
Angela goes to the bedroom where Mick met his grisly fate. As she moves into the room, Spirit sends her another terrifying glimpse of the past.
Again, another flash, a vision. I could see a vision of Mick's body lying under the window. Actually could see his injuries in his head and down the one side.
Now Angela sees something wonderful.
Then all of a sudden, I saw Mick in my mind's eye.
The spirit of the dead publican appears standing before her.
And he was making a point of a thick gold chain bracelet which was holding up.
Mick tells Angela that his killer also stole his bracelet.
Mick said that he knew that person, he had drunk with that person, he had fished with that person, he knew that person very, very well. I felt totally aghast. I just thought, take a deep breath here, I can't believe what I've just heard.
It's an astonishing revelation. But before Angela can react, she has another vision. 3 men running away.
It's almost as if they've rushed past me, and if I could feel their panic. But one of them had something the size of a shoebox with him. That's all I saw.
Angela has never experienced such an incredible barrage of visions, but as she leaves the pub, she has the most terrifying insight of all.
As I walked through the pub, I glanced at the bar, and there behind the bar was a young man pulling pints. I got this awful shudder through me, complete coldness. I just felt that there was complete emptiness there, as if he'd got no soul. And I realised then that I was actually looking at the culprit.
Not waiting to see his face, Angela runs from the pub. If she's correct, the killer is still right under the noses of the police. Landlord Mick Hughes has been brutally murdered above his pub, the Royal Oak, by person or persons unknown. Psychic Angela McGee has visited the scene of the crime. Her spirit allies sent her an astonishing series of visions containing clues about the murder.
I saw the vision of 3 men going up to the Black Fire Escape staircase. I then saw Mick's body. I saw Mick himself. I saw 3 men leaving with something the size of a shoebox. I glanced at the bar and I realised then that I was actually looking at the culprit.
Despite months of painstaking investigation, the police still don't have enough solid evidence to make an arrest.
And when there was a feeling of a marathon about that inquiry.
There was a great deal of information coming in that was being looked at, but little that was helping us to get to the bottom of what had actually happened.
The police are running out of options when fate leads them to Angela.
In the course of my inquiries, I met a woman who had met Angela McGee at one of her psychic meetings. This woman stated that Angela had discussed the murder with her.
We decided that whilst the evidential opportunities might be limited, it would really be foolhardy and a bit ignorant not to at least go and speak to Angela.
Mike Crump and a colleague go to Angela's house to interview her.
She invited us in. She made us a cup of tea, and we spoke to Angela about what she knew.
Angela tells the police about her vision on the fire escape and of the body in the bedroom. She had no way of knowing these things, but her account matches closely what police found in forensic examination.
I was startled and sceptical, equally curious and intrigued.
Now she really begins to surprise the police.
She claimed that 3 men had been involved in the murder and that one of those men had known Michael Hughes.
It sounds incredible, but Angela's information fits with a number of theories the police are working on.
To put numbers on offenders raised some eyebrows, but from analysing the scene and trying to generate some hypotheses around what had happened, I think we were all fairly comfortable that it was more than one.
She'd had a vision of them running away, one of them carrying a shoebox-shaped object.
The police know what Angela does not, that a safe the size of a shoebox was taken from the pub.
We clearly knew that the safe had been ripped from its housing, so to hear Angela describe a box-shaped object being carried by a man was fascinating.
Angela's visions confirm facts the police already know or things they suspect.
Her account fitted in on a number of features with the hypotheses that we were running on. The difficulty for us was trying to match any evidential facts that we knew about with Angela's vision.
At the time of speaking to Angela, I was a little cynical and sceptical about the information she was providing, but in the fullness of time it was quite surprising how accurate some of the information she provided turned out to be.
Angela has given the police fresh clues, but for now they don't know what to make of them. The lead officer tries to reassure Mick's grieving family.
He'd come out and he'd explain there is things happening and we are working, but obviously we can't tell you everything in case it leaks out or in case it's wrong information we're receiving. He said, but trust me, we will sort this out and we will come one day with the answers for you.
For the police, the pressure is on. Then Angela McGee has another startling revelation.
I woke up the one morning, as I do sometimes, with messages. What I kept getting in my mind was a dolphin, block switch, dolphin, block switch.
Angela phones a friend to tell her about the message.
I was telling her about, I'm sure this is to do with the murder. I was getting the dolphin, block switch, a dolphin, block switch. And she said, there's a dolphin pub. I wanted to relay that information to Mike Crump, so I gave him a call.
Operation Greenside, DC Crump speaking, how can I help you?
And I told him about the dolphin and Bloxwich, and that something would happen in 3 days. All of a sudden, I get a name.
Yeah, OK, let's just get a pad and I'll just write it down.
I felt it was more like a nickname of either Daz or Gaz. And I felt that was also associated with murder.
Angela's information is relayed to the incident room, but for now, it's useless. Then, the police make a key discovery. They find the missing safe in a canal.
This is the canal at Slacky Lane, from where we recovered the safe that was from the Royal Oak pub. It was a breakthrough. It is important that we recover physical evidence, such as the safe.
Suddenly, Angela's message about the dolphin becomes clear.
And the Dolphin Public House is situated just at the top of the road, about 150 yards away from the spot where I'm standing now.
There is no earthly way that Angela could have known this.
At the time that Angela spoke to us about the Dolphin Public House, there was no obvious connection between that pub and our investigation. It hadn't featured at all. At the very least, it was interesting.
Police are left wondering about Angela's message of the nickname.
The difficulty for us, where do you put Angela? What do you do with what Angela can tell you? And the problem is that you can't use it, can you? You can't ask Angela to step into a Crown Court witness box and on oath say, I'm a medium and I know what happened. It's completely inadmissible.
To convict, they still need more concrete evidence. Then, exactly 6 months after the murder, the Royal Oak pub is burgled again. This time, police get the lead they've been waiting for.
Bizarrely, on the exact 6-month anniversary of Mick's death at the pub was broken into again in very chillingly similar circumstances.
This time, eyewitnesses recognize the thief. Part-time bartender Gavin Chapman, son of Beryl Chapman, Mick Hughes' partner at the Royal Oak.
Gavin Chapman had a severe drug problem. We believed he was addicted to heroin and possibly crack cocaine. Michael Hughes was always quite suspicious that Gavin was taking money from him in various forms in order to fund his drug addiction.
The police had always suspected Gavin Chapman might be involved in the murder, but he has an alibi with 2 other men, Stephen Lockley and Lee Worgan.
We had evidence that cast doubt on their movements in terms of the accounts that they had given. But as far as convicting them for a murder was concerned, we had very little.
Now the police take a gamble. They bring all 3 men in for questioning. One by one, the men are interrogated and their stories scrutinized.
In the initial stages, they stuck by their witness statements.
I think they thought that if they maintained their original pack of lies, that they would walk. I'm sure that they were that blasé and confident that they thought that they could just bluff it out.
Relatively quickly into the interview process, one of them changed the story.
And they began to point the finger at each other.
The men confess to burgling the Royal Oak on the night of the murder. They accuse each other of being the killer. Police decide to charge them all with murder as a joint enterprise. It's a bold strategy.
There was a concern that was at the back of my mind that around that joint enterprise argument, the jury wouldn't be able to clearly identify in their own minds who it was that struck the fatal blows.
We felt that we had a very good and a very strong case, but you are in the hands of the jury.
You're hopeful, but you've always just, you're crossing 2 fingers and hoping for the best.
The trial is set for October 2004 in Birmingham, with 3 men charged, at least one of whom knew Mick and worked behind the bar. Everything that Angela told the police seems to be coming true. Gavin Chapman, Lee Worgan and Stephen Lockley are set to be tried for Mick Hughes' murder. Waiting for the result, Angela goes on with her normal work as a medium.
It was a few months later, after I had my visit to the Royal Oak, that I had a phone call.
Carol Hall has lost her mother and wants a medium to contact her in spirit.
I had no previous knowledge of Angela before this phone number was handed to me. In fact, she was one of about 4 numbers that were handed to me. And the reason I picked Angela was because she was the one more local, because I didn't know if there was a radius to how far they'd travel. And like the address was pretty local, so I thought I'd go for Angela.
Angela visits Carol one evening at her home.
Angela sat in the bedroom and I sat on the chair, more or less opposite to her.
The spirit of a mother came through, and I felt that her mother's energy was all around the bedroom where we were. And then I told Carol that her mother was with her son in spirit.
Got to talking about it, and then they just said, which was the devastating bit, who's Michael? And that was when I just went to pieces, and I says, that was my brother. And she said, your mum's telling me she called him Michael, everybody else called him Mick, which was spot on.
Then all of a sudden, I had a flash of the Royal Oak and a flash of Mick in my mind. And I said, it's Mick from the Royal Oak murder.
The look on Angela's face, it couldn't be captured on tape when she suddenly realised who she was talking about. She said, he keeps telling me, I've been there, and he says, can I ask, is it the pub in Pelsall? And I says, yeah.
It's an amazing revelation. Angela didn't know it, but Carol Hall is Mick Hughes' sister. Mick's spirit has sought her out again.
I could hear Mick say that he would see justice, and he would see justice 3 times. All I heard was justice, justice, justice. And then I says to Carol, I can see the family with their hands up in the air in triumph. And he also said something about Stafford and time, which I had to relay, which didn't make sense to me at the time.
With the trial hanging in the balance, Angela's message gives comfort to Carol.
With my brother coming through via Angela and saying that justice will be done, she was so right with Mum. I wanted this to be so right as well.
But until the jury gives their verdict, the family can only hope that Angela's telling the truth. Just days before the trial is due to start in Birmingham, part of Mick's message becomes clear. Another case has overrun. The trial is moved to Stafford Crown Court.
The court case, up until the Friday prior to the Monday's date for the court case, was going to be Birmingham, then it was going to be Wolverhampton, and on the Monday we had to go to Stafford, which was uncanny, very uncanny, because we weren't aware of that, nobody was.
For police and the family, it's a tense time.
You've always got that element of doubt in the back of your mind, and you're worried about how the jury will perceive the evidence that you feel is very strong, and how your witnesses will come across as well.
The trial runs for 3 long weeks.
I was struck by how appallingly badly the 3 male defendants conducted themselves throughout the whole trial. They sat at the back of the court and grinned, chuckled to each other, made smug comments about some of the witnesses that appeared in the witness box. And when they were ultimately asked to give evidence, they made the worst job of it I've ever seen in my life. They were absolutely appalling. They were flippant, clearly telling lies. Chapman was asked whether he wanted to take the oath, and his very first words to the jury were, whatever. He did himself no favours.
To hear people read it out as to the horrific injuries and how they occurred and how many times they hit my dad, That was really hard, and at one stage my mum and my two brothers had to leave because they couldn't cope. Because to everybody else it's a story, to us it was our dad.
Finally, the moment of truth arrives.
When the jury went out, the courtroom is charged with emotion.
It's all right, you're just sitting there thinking, please God, let them say guilty.
The three men are found guilty. As Angela predicted, justice has been done 3 times.
Each of the 3 men were convicted of the murder of Michael Hughes. They were also convicted of burglary and attempting to pervert the course of justice in terms of having lied to us in the form of their witness statements.
It was just unreal. It was a dream come true.
As the family leave court, a photographer is waiting.
He said, well, for the picture you're going to have to punch the air and smile.
In a flash, Angela's last vision becomes reality.
But when I saw them, their hands go up, and I thought, yeah, that's completed the picture now.
Angela's messages to the police and the family seem to have proved uncannily accurate.
On speaking to Angela initially, I was quite cynical and sceptical about the nature of the information she provided. But in the fullness of time, aspects of it turned out to be quite accurate. Whilst it was always of limited value to us as police officers, this was nevertheless surprising.
Stepping outside the police officer function and thinking about myself as a person and Carol and Sharon spending some time with Angela, if I found myself in the same circumstances and I saw that olive branch of hope, would I reach out for it? Yeah, I probably would.
It's been an incredible experience for Angela.
I feel I've done my job's worth. I know that I work for the God Energy Force and the God Energy Spirit, and I'm just an instrument. But to me, it's like a pat on the back, I think. It was just a nice pat on the back.
September 1975. 2 con men swindle millions of pounds and vanish without a trace. The case is going cold until psychic Bob Cracknell has a vision.
They're living in a cave. And they said, where? I said, Scotland.
No one believes him. The police think he's a crank.
You deal in facts and that's it.
But time is running out. Can the psychic find the con men before their innocent victims lose everything? The strange story of the 2 preachers who conned millions of pounds begins back in the 1960s, when 2 respected middle-aged businessmen open a nursing home in the south of England. Jim Miller and John Bellard have been together since university. They are intellectuals, interested in theology. They're also lay preachers, with friends high up in the Anglican Church. Miller is also a holistic therapist. He's clever, charismatic, a natural leader. Bellard is quieter, more reflective. He is the home's bookkeeper. The 2 men become local benefactors. They help the poor and give to charity. They are well liked in the local community. With the success of the home, Miller and Bellard begin to expand their business interests. They set up a company selling musical instruments and indulge their taste for fast cars by sponsoring racing events. The two men are now living the high life and enjoying every minute of it. Then, in September 1975, the mirror cracks. Miller and Bellard fail to turn up with the prize money at a race they've sponsored. The outcry reaches the ears of Norman Luck, crime reporter with Britain's Daily Express newspaper.
We had a telephone call from a number of people involved in motor racing at Brands Hatch, and they were a bit upset because their sponsor had vanished.
As soon as Luck begins to sniff around, he discovers that the missing sponsorship money is only the tip of a multi-million-pound fraud. Detective Constable David Fickweiler of the Sussex Fraud Squad is already on the case.
They had entered into thousands of finance agreements with various finance companies. The transactions allegedly were for the sale of organs to churches.
In the early 1970s, an electric organ can cost up to £5,000. Churches don't have that kind of money. And finance companies will only lend to individuals. So the charismatic Jim Miller persuades his friends and employees to do a good deed for a church by signing for a loan on their behalf. The church will then repay the loan from their organ fund. Jeff Green was one of the employees who signed for a loan.
You feel that you're in a small selective group that are just helping a few churches out. So on the face of it, that seemed okay.
Except that the churches are completely unaware of their involvement in the scheme. With a signed agreement, Miller and Bellard collect the money for the organ from the finance company, but don't deliver anything to the church.
There were many instances of the same organ being financed several times. So, quite obviously, it was total fraud.
At first, Miller and Bellard pay back the loans with new loans, so their friends feel reassured that their good deeds are working. And they sign more agreements. Eventually, the con men are forging their friends' signatures to borrow more money. Miller and Bellard end up borrowing over £5 million to pay for organs that are never delivered. When the two men have borrowed up to the limit, the finance companies begin to breathe down their necks, as it is their company supplying the organs. Miller and Bellard throw a farewell party and fly off for a holiday in France. 2 days later, a postcard is delivered saying they arrived safely. That is the last anyone hears of them. Shortly afterwards, Miller and Bellard's friends and employees suddenly find they are about to lose everything they possess if they don't repay the millions they have signed for. The con men have vanished, and the police have no idea where they are. So journalist Norman Luck and Detective Fickweiler decide to pool their resources to try to find them. But after a month, neither have made any progress. Then, one evening, a friend of Luck's suggests he might use the help of a psychic. Psychic Bob Cracknell is keen to use his abilities to help fight the crime.
I think Norman was extremely cynical at the time, you know. He was a hard-bitten journalist.
Bob meets Norman Luck at his home. The journalist shows him some photographs.
I think my first inference was that a church connection. I kept saying, you know, there's a church connection here all the way through.
Bob then surprises the journalist with accurate descriptions of the con men.
Now, this guy, he's the weak one of the two. He's got a gammy leg. And Norman said, how can you tell that from a photograph?
I was sceptical, of course I was. But there was nowhere else he could have got the information from. If he'd done some research on the situation beforehand, then possibly he would have known.
Then Bob's psychic abilities astound the skeptical journalist. He senses a powerful figure at the heart of the scandal, someone high up in the church who is being blackmailed.
I hadn't been told anything about the case, and I said, now there's a bishop involved. Form of blackmail of some description. It's a big fraud, but it's blackmail.
I was rather amazed because I didn't know how the hell he could have known that. That hadn't been released by the police, and it certainly hadn't been released by me.
Had the psychic uncovered the bizarre connection between two fugitive conmen and a blackmailed bishop? Bob doesn't know it yet, but he's about to embark on a journey that will change his life. Two respected businessmen in southern England have vanished after conning millions of pounds from hundreds of innocent people who now stand to lose everything. The police can find no trace of the fraudsters. Psychic Bob Cracknell is sure their whereabouts have something to do with the church. Crime reporter Norman Luck is dubious of Bob's abilities until the psychic mentions a blackmailed Anglican bishop.
He's an astute journalist, but I think the fact that I came up with this one thing, which he said, that's convinced me, nobody else, only I know that, I've only just found it out. And I think he said to me, you were reading my mind.
Luck has been told confidentially by the police of an embarrassing story at the heart of the crime. Miller and Bellard were close friends with an Anglican bishop who was having extramarital affairs.
Miller and Bellard were allowing this senior church person to use a chalet in the grounds for his various dalliances.
So, this is where it all
happened. And this obviously was the secret behind the whole lot.
Yes.
The reason they started the fraudulent transactions was to raise money to pay off what they said were a number of ladies of the night who were threatening to expose their relationship with a former Bishop of Guildford.
They had involved themselves in a financial scam, and with the proceeds, they were helping this senior church person to pay off blackmail demands.
But then the bishop died before repaying the money, leaving Miller and Bellard with a large debt. Could this have been the motive which led two men of impeccable character and no previous record into a life of deception and fraud? Staff at the home give Bob some articles of the men's clothing to see if he can sense their whereabouts.
From the moment I began to touch the items, I was convinced that there was somebody close by who knew where they were. And I said, no, they're not in France. They're here. They've come back.
But if Miller and Bellard are not in France, who sent the postcard? Where have the two men disappeared to? Everything he sees and feels at the retirement home convinces Bob that the two con men are still in the UK.
Right from the start, Bob had this feeling that they hadn't come back to the UK. I don't think I believed it.
And I think that was when Norman got his second shock, when I said, they're here. And they said, where? I said, Scotland, Ullapool.
Ullapool is a fishing village on the west coast of Scotland. Where could the fugitive con men hide out in such a small place?
The whole thing that was getting me throughout was church. And I'm not talking about the church organs. The connection is with the church. I know it.
Miller and Bellard had always had a religious leaning. Apparently, they had often discussed becoming monks and joining a monastery.
That was possibly the church connection I was looking at. They were in some monastery. They were in some religious retreat.
But there is no monastery in or near Ullapool. Could he have gotten it all wrong? Detective Fickweiler, meanwhile, ransacks the nursing home searching for the money, but finds nothing. Could Miller and Bellard have taken it with them? The police interview everyone close to the conmen. Of particular interest to them is Jeff Green, the manager of their racing sponsorships and one of their most trusted employees.
Well, my impression of Jeff Green was that he was one of those people that thought Miller and Bellard were genuine and nice people, real kindly people, and I think he had been, like everybody else, conned by them.
When Luck and Cracknell visit Jeff Green at his home in Brighton, he insists he knows nothing of the two men's whereabouts.
I thought Jeff Green came over as a fair, as genuine character, that he was just another victim of the Miller and Bellard situation.
After talking to Green, I was totally convinced this man was lying. They were in Scotland. He knew, and he was able to contact them. Norman, however, hard-bitten journalist, stated quite simply, "Sorry, without evidence, we cannot pursue it." I was devastated. What could I do? How could I convince anybody?
Bob now faces a serious problem. How can he prove that Jeff Green knows where the two men are hiding? How does a psychic prove what amounts to no more than a feeling? He has only one option: to get the proof himself. Bob decides to go to the west coast of Scotland to try to find some evidence for what his psychic impressions are telling him.
That I had this absolute conviction of the connection with the church, and I began to think in terms of a church as a retreat. I thought, okay, it's on an island or somewhere like that.
He makes Ullapool his base. From here, he plans to search the islands off the coast. He immediately sets about questioning the hotel staff.
Doing my amateur Seamus bit, you know, have you seen this man or this man or this man? I thought, well, you know, you've got to start somewhere, you never know.
A couple of people seem to recognize the faces, but aren't certain. Bob then sets out to search the islands, showing the photographs to everyone he meets.
One of the ferrymen, I mean, he was quite genuine, and he said, oh, yes, I've seen this guy before, yeah. Quite genuine, you know, which gave me excitement. So I'm beginning to feel that I'm on the track.
Bob's psychic abilities have got him on the trail of the conmen. Will they lead him to their hiding place? But once out at sea, Bob's hopes take a dive. There are over 40 islands off the coast at Ullapool. Finding anyone out there who doesn't want to be found could take years.
With all these islands around you, where do you begin? I can well understand the reticence of the police. I mean, can you imagine? They're listening to a guy who's been labelled a crank saying, an island off Ullapool. Yes, sir, we'll send a man out straight away. It's incredible.
All Bob's psychic feelings about the men's disappearance have had a strong connection to a church or a monastery. So once back on the mainland, Bob decides to explore this link. But the nearest monastery is over 100 miles away at Fort William.
There was two people hitchhiking along the road. So I stopped and gave them a lift, a young couple. They were heading for Glasgow. Something caused me to, for some unknown reason, take the photographs out and say, look, have you ever seen these two guys? And to my absolute amazement, the girl said, oh, yes. Recognize them both. Oh, what, do you remember where you saw them? Yes, at the Royal Hotel in Ullapool. That was it. I was convinced that that was the place. I was right.
The witnesses give Bob the evidence he needs. It seems his psychic powers are right after all. The conmen are in Ullapool, exactly where he said they were. But is this enough for the police to catch them? conmen Miller and Bellard have disappeared after defrauding friends and employees of £5 million. The police have no idea where they are. Psychic Bob Cracknell is convinced the two men are hiding on an island off the west coast of Scotland, but no one believes him. So he goes there himself to look for them, and finds evidence that the fugitives are in the area. With renewed confidence, Bob returns to London with the names and addresses of his witnesses. He's sure the police can now catch the con men, and the Daily Express can print the story. But Bob's in for an unpleasant surprise. Back in London, Norman Luck and the Daily Express are not impressed.
That wasn't sufficient proof. You can't say, I think. You've got to either produce a body and say they are staying at so-and-so, so-and-so guest house. We have found the Southern Organs fraudsters. But that didn't happen.
After all his hard work, Bob hits a dead end. No one wants to listen. The con men will get away with it, and their victims will lose everything. His dream of a career fighting crime is fading fast.
I knew that I was right. It became a personal thing, you know. I really didn't know what to do. I'd gone out on this limb, whereas a psychic takes in all forms of vibrations, adverse and otherwise. When a psychic gets depressed, believe me, it's doubly worse.
And then, as the case begins to go cold, Bob receives a final psychic clue about the con men's whereabouts.
I had a dream in which these two guys were living in a cave. In a desolate area, you know, definitely living in a cave.
It was such a vivid dream. There was no question of doubt about it. I woke up convinced, as a result, that they had been living in a cave. Well, this is a bossy. As near to a cave as you can possibly imagine.
But the west of Scotland is peppered with these stone huts. How is the psychic going to convince anyone to search them all? Bob phones Norman, but the journalist is away. In desperation, he tells Detective Fickweiler about his dream. But Fickweiler's response to the idea that someone with £5 million would be living in a stone hut is less than enthusiastic.
We deal in facts. And if someone says, I think, I believe, I know things, well, then you ask them what they know. And if they can't come up with anything, why should one waste time pursuing it? Yeah, cynical, sceptical. Yeah, most coppers are. You deal in facts, and that's it.
The police are a funny breed. Unless it's written down or unless they can see it with their own eyes, they don't believe it.
It's now nearly a year since the con men have disappeared. Have they vanished into thin air? The police have exhausted all their avenues of investigation. Yet they still won't listen to a psychic. It'll take a lot more than a dream to convince them that Bob isn't a crank. And then a stroke of luck. Bob's persistence is vindicated. Jeff Green feels let down by his friends and employers, and the pressure from the finance companies demanding repayment has become too much to bear.
I trusted these guys. I thought, they'll be okay, they're going to come back. I know where they are, they're going to come back, they're going to put it all right, and so on. Then, of course, 2, 3 months, 4 months, getting into the 5th month, and nothing's happening. All these writs are flying. Your health goes down, your marriage breaks up, you're going to lose your house, and this makes you think about it all in a different way.
Green's account of Miller and Bellard's disappearance is extraordinary.
After landing in France, they made their way back on the ferry to Dover. where Jeff Green picked them up, drove them all the way up to the west coast of Scotland. From Ullapool, they set sail in 2 dinghies to an island called Priest Island.
Here was the church connection Bob had tried so hard to find. The 2 men were living in a stone hut on Priest Island, 4 miles off Ullapool. The psychic's powers were absolutely on target.
There's me chasing my backside on islands, connection with the church. Ullapool was the location. I was there. The living in the cave was correct. I believe Norman's headline story was living in a cave, eating cockle soup. But now I would have, I would have gone and got an ordnance map of the whole area and checked it out. And Priest Island would have stuck out like a sore thumb, would it not?
It took us hours to get there, and when we got there, we were thrown up against some rocks because we couldn't control the boat. The seas were too rough. In the end, we were thrown into a small cove.
Green returned home, and the 2 con men, in their 50s, set up camp in the roofless stone hut. They stayed there for nearly 8 months throughout a sub-zero winter, perhaps to make amends for the chaos and misery they'd unleashed. The 2 spiritual swindlers simply turned their backs on the world.
They left everybody, and when you leave somebody that trusts you and has great faith in you and wants to still keep you in their lives, it's a terrible thing.
Why should he cover up for these people when he was one of their victims?
When Miller and Bellard ran out of money and provisions, they returned to the mainland and moved into a caravan. They phoned Jeff Green to send them more money. Their lack of contact before that and the fact that he and others had suffered so much in their absence incensed Green. He gave them up. At their trial, both men plead guilty. With no previous offenses, they are given 6 years each. The bishop's wife is still alive, so his name is never mentioned, and the millions, they say, were all spent repaying loans and enjoying a brief taste of the high life.
None of the money was recovered. There was no indication in the books and records as to where all the money had gone.
It seems Bob Cracknell's visions had been right from the start. The con men had returned to Britain from France and hidden on an island off the west coast of Scotland. Priest Island, due to its name, did have a connection with the church, and the 2 men had been living in a primitive stone dwelling, not entirely unlike a cave, and perhaps the pressure, psychic and otherwise, which Bob put on Jeff Green might even have encouraged his confession.
I think that possibly Green said, this guy's not going to let go. I can't take it.
This case changed Bob's life. He became known as the psychic detective and spent the next 30 years fighting crime.
Basically, you are aware of atmosphere, feelings, vibrations that the average person is not aware of. Like a radio, if you like, on shortwave. With all the crackling and noise going along, you've got to go along and tune it in, and bang, you're on the station.
(1983) West London. 25-year-old Jackie Poole is assaulted and strangled to death in her own home.
It was such a nasty murder.
Despite a thorough police investigation, there's just not enough evidence to convict a killer. A local psychic believes she is visited by the victim's vengeful spirit. In a supernatural trance, she is taken back to the murder scene.
And I could see it as plain as anything was Porky.
But what part would her visions of the name Pokey and a brown sweater play in solving this brutal crime?
I could feel Jackie saying to me, ring them now.
Would a psychic's paranormal powers or hard forensic science nail Jackie's killer? Saturday, the 12th of February, 1983. Ruislip, a busy suburb 17 miles west of central London. Local psychic Christine Holohan's sixth sense has been on high alert all weekend.
I knew something was wrong, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. A feeling of coldness in the room. I'd hear footsteps, I'd sort of hear the door opening and closing. It was a sense of feeling of gloom. I was wondering what was happening. This was extremely intense.
Was Christine's psychic experience connected to the incredible events that were about to be played out? The next day, a concerned friend of Jacqueline Poole contacts the police. The recently separated shop assistant hasn't been seen for 2 days and isn't answering her phone. A young police constable and the father of Jackie's boyfriend break in to discover that the popular 25-year-old has been sexually assaulted and strangled. Heading up the investigation team is Detective Superintendent Tony Lundy.
Well, first of all, there was no forced entry to the premises. So she'd let somebody in or they'd con their way in. There were no broken windows, doors, or anything. So it seemed pretty obvious it's somebody who she associates with.
Jackie has been strangled to death with a cord. Personal items have been stolen and her clothing is in disarray.
She was fanatical at wearing rings and necklaces and bracelets and stuff, but basically the lot had gone. I think there may have been something left on her finger that couldn't come off, but everything that could be removed had gone.
Jackie's body has lain undiscovered for some 48 hours. The killer has a head start. Police begin to interview Jackie's friends and family for vital clues and release details of the attack to the press.
It became obvious from a very early stage that it was going to be a difficult investigation because of the fact there'd been no break into the premises. We were really looking at close connections. Her husband had left her some time before, so obviously he was a possibility as a suspect from the word go, and numerous names were flooding in really from the outset.
The night after the body is discovered, just 3 miles away, Christine Holohan claims her psychic abilities are put to the test once again.
And after a while, I could see him starting to appear, and he started to get bigger, and eventually there was like a shape. And from the shape, I could see the outline of a young woman. She seemed very agitated and very sort of frustrated, and I sort of said, I'm going to take a chance here. So I said, are you the young lady that's been murdered? And so I said, is it Jackie Poole? And she said, Jackie Hunt.
Why is the spirit calling herself Jackie Hunt, and what connection does she have with the murder victim?
So I asked her, how did she want me to help her? So she told me that she knew who had murdered her. And I explained to her that I would have to have solid evidence. I couldn't go to the police and just say somebody appeared to me and said they were murdered. I had to be able to go to the police with something positive. And then all of a sudden, then she went. And I thought, oh, that's it, she's gone. I was anxious of going to the police in case I would give them information that they would think I got from other sources or from a paper.
Christine is desperate for more clues. Amazingly, the spirit returns the following night.
It was like I was watching a television scene. It's like I flashed onto another level. It was then that I felt I was taken on a journey. I was just feeling what she was feeling. I felt myself in this flat, and I got a terrible sense of feeling that I was being dragged in slow motion as if she was still going through it. And it was horrible. And I could see all the struggle, and I could see what was happening.
Christine believes she is a psychic witness to murder and sees a woman called Jackie Hunt being attacked by a young man. She claims she is shown the layout of the victim's home. It's not much to go on, but she cannot ignore the spirit's pleas for justice.
I started, realising what she'd gone through and thought, if I go to the police, I'm going to leave myself open to the person who actually murdered her. I started to think of lots of things. You're going to protect yourself. I was a bit afraid.
Christine is desperate to describe what she has seen to the police. But murder investigation teams are skeptical over the use of psychics, and she must risk ridicule.
I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to ring them, but I also knew that she just was not going to go away. So it's like she was my friend now. She wasn't just that she was a victim who came to me looking for help. She was like she was now my friend. Eventually, I could feel Jackie saying to me, ring them now. I could hear it really plain in my ears, ring them now.
While the psychic builds up courage to call the police with crucial information, the murder investigation team work around the clock to nail the killer.
You don't often get called out to scenes of murder where a young lady has been beaten, strangled, and it was a very, very nasty crime scene.
With no sign of a break-in, police investigate the theory that Christine knew her killer.
She had many, many friends, all from her same age group, from being brought up in the area and so on. And we had to eliminate over 70 suspects. Many you could eliminate quickly, but many, many, many were explored at length, and that made it very difficult.
Christine Holohan claims she has visions of the murder sent to her by a spirit called Jackie Hunt. The local psychic feels she can no longer ignore the ghost's pleas for help and risks ridicule by contacting the police.
I must admit I'm not one who's much of a believer in that, but at the same time, obviously, any possibilities to help you, you're going to explore them.
Constables Andrew Smith and Tony Batters are sent to interview the psychic. Unknown to Christine, Tony Batters was the first police officer at the murder scene. Sadly, Tony passed away in 2003. His widow, Anne, remembers the day that would change his life forever.
I think it could well have been the first time he'd actually found a victim. And she was young. It was a horrific murder. Because he had been the first officer on the scene and had actually stayed at the scene for several hours, he knew the layout, what the situation was in the flat, things that had been broken or turned over or something that was out of place. He believed there would be nobody else who would know that detail other than himself.
If Christine's claims were true, then convincing this hardened skeptic with first-hand knowledge of the crime scene would be a major challenge.
I thought, oh God, here goes. And I was tuning it out, Jackie, I hope you're here. I really hope you're here at this stage. And she was. She went to explain everything that she could possibly explain. She went to as much details as she could possibly give me. I explained when she came through, I asked her, was she Jackie Poole? And she said, Jackie Hunt.
The psychic's first piece of information is a hit. Tony Batters knows that Jackie Poole's maiden name is Hunt. They are the same woman.
Maybe I was hitting on something, but I didn't know what it was. I hadn't got a clue. She showed me around the house. She explained exactly where everything was.
Christine claims she is transported back to the crime scene and is able to see 2 cups in the kitchen, prescription forms, and a black address book. Amazingly, this tallies with what Tony has seen at Jackie's flat less than a week earlier. These details were not released to the press after the murder.
And I could see where she was lying, and I could see her hand. There was 2 rings in particular he couldn't get off her hand.
Jackie's missing jewelry was reported in the local papers, but nothing specific had been mentioned about the 2 rings that had been left on her body.
She also sort of was very insistent that there was a jumper that he was going to be thrown away. And she said, it's important to get this jumper, because if you don't, she said, it's going to be gone.
Christine claims that she never met Jackie or any of her acquaintances when she was alive. But during her trance, she uses the names of many of Jackie's friends and family. One name is a mystery.
She mentioned Barbara Stone, and she didn't give me any significance on the name, but I said anything she gives me, I'll take on board.
No one on the investigation has ever heard of Barbara Stone. Despite the puzzling name, Tony is amazed by the psychic's insight.
At this point, he said, ask Jackie to describe her killer. And she explained he's 23. He had a birthday April or May, with Taurus. He had dark hair, dark skin. He had tattoo.
Christine seems to give the police officers a profile of the murderer. But nothing would be more useful than a name.
So I said I would just very quietly go into a trance. I really had to tune in very, very strong with Jackie. I'd really bring her into me close. And I could feel her. It was like as if she actually really came through, as if she was inside of me.
The psychic resorts to a technique called remote writing, which unlocks her unconscious. She hopes this psychic skill will reveal the all-important name.
Jackie helped me spell out the name. She'd actually got the attention of the police, and this was it. And I could see it as plain as anything. It was Porky. I knew at that point I had actually hit something significant had happened, though he never actually quite said anything about it.
Over 20 years later, Christine Holohan returns to the room where she used a paranormal technique called remote writing to reveal a name of a killer.
No, it was like as if somebody had taken my hand and very, very slowly had actually written out the name, very slowly. And then it started to come up. The minute I'd written it, it came up very clear. And so we got Pokey. She said it was a nickname. It's a nickname. He's known as a nickname. And I can remember Tony saying to me, Pokey, are you sure? And I said, that's what, and I showed him. And he seemed quite taken back when he looked at what I'd written. It was like as if I'd sort of touched on a nerve.
The name Pokey sends shivers down the spine of the two detectives. It is the nickname of Anthony Ruark. He is a friend of Jackie's boyfriend and is well known by the victim. Ruark is already amongst the murder team's prime suspects and has already been questioned.
Well, I felt I'd done all I could possibly do, and I got a sense of feeling from Jackie as if she sort of was saying to me, look, if that's not convinced him, what is going to convince him?
That same day, Tony Batters returns to the murder squad convinced by the psychic's abilities.
He was just amazed, totally amazed that she could have that sort of information.
Now, Tony must persuade the rest of his team to trust the testimony of a ghost.
I'd said to Batters that she was telling us something that she'd heard from the locals, and she didn't have any information whatsoever that could assist us on the inquiry at all.
During the attack, Jackie had jewelry stolen. It is crucial in the hunt for her killer.
And my attitude was that when she can tell us where the jewellery is or something conclusive to assist us, then I'll believe in mediums. But at this stage, just don't waste my time.
The police discount the work of the psychic and set about extracting the truth from Pokey.
Not the easiest person to obviously break down, especially when you're interviewing them about a very, very horrible, serious murder. But the officers who did interview him were fairly convinced that he was involved. The difficulty was being convinced and finding evidence to back it up is another matter.
Christine had told Tony Batters that Jackie's killer is a Taurus in his early 20s and that he is dark-haired, dark-skinned with tattoos. Amazingly, this corresponds with Pokey's profile. The spirit of Jackie was desperate to draw attention to a sweater. Police have already retrieved this vital clue. DCI Norman McKinley was to become closely involved with Jackie's case.
During the search of Tony Ruark's house, and in a dustbin, they found a jumper. This jumper was submitted to the forensic laboratory, and of course, fibers, having come from Jacqueline's clothing, and also plaster particles, which was also found on Jacqueline's clothing, was also found on this jumper.
The evidence forensically links Pokey with Jackie, but the murder suspect has an explanation.
The problem that the police had was that Rourke knew Jackie. He did say that he had spoken to her during the week prior to her death, so contact had been made then.
Despite a psychic pointing the finger at Pokey and the police suspecting this known criminal, after a 15-month investigation, the team is shut down.
We have this evidence, we have that evidence, but it was never, ever going to be sufficient at that time to instigate a prosecution. So that was the low point, but closing it down when the family still had no solution to it was very, very disappointing.
Tony Batter's appeals to work with the psychic are ignored. Now he has to deal with the investigation team being disbanded.
Oh, he was very frustrated because they obviously had done a lot of work and they thought that they had enough evidence.
Christine believes Jackie is devastated that her killer walks free.
She was so angry in the sense that he walked away from the murder as if he had absolutely no feelings either way.
The psychic remains frustrated by the police skepticism.
I done the very best I could possibly do. I gave him the information. I trusted the information that Jackie gave me was accurate, and I knew there was nothing else I could really do. I always somehow believed that there would be justice someday. I just didn't know when.
Christine is certain the unsolved murder will be reinvestigated, and it is. In 1999, some 15 years after the main inquiry was shut down, Christine has another visitation from a troubled spirit.
And I could see an image of a blonde-haired woman. And I kept looking and I kept thinking that it looked like Jackie, but I said, I must be imagining this. Couldn't understand what the significance of that would be.
Unknown to the psychic, the police reinvestigate the 16-year-old murder case after an informant brings in new leads on a suspect that is not Pokey. Was the apparition a coincidence, or Jackie trying to let Christine know that the hunt for her killer had started again? In the intervening years, a cutting-edge DNA technology had been developed that should allow police to test forensic evidence taken from Jackie's flat 16 years ago.
The introduction of DNA low copy number, or LCN, was completely new. The DNA technology in 2001 and even today is very accurate, so much that the forensic scientists can identify one person in a billion from a DNA profile. We had every opportunity now to solve a murder, and particular for the benefit of Jacqueline's family, to ensure that justice was done for them.
Bodily fluids collected from the crime scene and skin extracted from under Jackie's nails are examined by forensic scientists. But the new DNA technology will take 12 months to deliver the results. The wait is agonizing.
I got a telephone call from the Home Office laboratory, and I couldn't believe it, that the bodily swab had produced a full profile.
Is Pokey the killer?
The DNA LCN match, the full profile, came down to Tony Rourke, who also was known as Pokey.
Amazingly, the results tally with the name that had been scrawled on a notepad by psychic Christine Holohan over 17 years ago.
He was arrested on Wednesday, the 24th of May, in a car park in Cirencester. He was arrested for the murder of Jacqueline Poole.
Pokey is stunned to discover that he is being arrested for a crime that he was certain he'd walked away from. And in August 2001, he is tried at the Old Bailey in London.
We've suspected him all these years, and now at last, hopefully, he's going to get his comeuppance and go away for a long, long time. Everybody was hoping that the verdict was going to go the right way. I was with, obviously, the brothers of the victim, and I mean, the evidence had been very strong, but you can never be 100% sure with juries. So they were very, very anxious and very, very, you know, wary of the verdict.
Tony Batters attends the 2-week trial. The retired police officer had listed 130 specific points that Christine claimed she received from Jackie's spirit. Now, he wanted to see just how many were correct.
I think it would have been really that he needed to know for himself. He had to prove it for himself. But the amount of information that Christine did give, if that was available to other murder inquiries, then obviously it would be very valuable.
According to Tony's notes, an amazing 120 facts match information brought out during the trial, including personal details about Jackie, the layout of the crime scene, and how Jackie knew her killer.
Although Christine lived locally, she didn't know Jackie, she didn't know her family, she didn't know her circle of friends at all. But it's just in the amount of detail that she gave, and most of it was proven to be correct.
The new DNA evidence is used to establish Pokey was at Jackie's flat on the day of the murder. The plaster particles taken from the brown pullover that Jackie had told Christine about are also produced as evidence.
The jumper, which had been retained by police in a sealed bag from 1983, was produced in evidence at Rourke's trial and played a significant part.
Pokey amends his story and claims he visited Jackie on the night of the murder, but that she was alive when he left. The solid prosecution evidence challenges this, and after 2 weeks, the jury is unanimously convinced of Pokey's guilt, and he is sentenced to life imprisonment. Justice at last for Jackie's family.
And when eventually the guilty verdict was brought in, they were absolutely over the moon. I mean, they were virtually shouting out in joy.
There is one final twist in the tale. The mysterious name, Barbara Stone, given to police by Christine nearly 20 years ago, becomes another psychic hit.
During the Old Bailey trial, Tony was sitting next to one of Jackie's brothers, and he asked him, did the name Barbara Stone mean anything? And he said, well, yes, of course, it was Jackie's best friend, but she had been killed in a road accident about a year or two before Jackie had been killed. So that was the answer to the name.
Christine's involvement in the Jackie Poole case hits the headlines. Her psychic skills have converted Tony Batters into a true believer.
She'd have had to be pretty good. He thought the information must have come directly from Jackie, because there was no other way that Christine would have had the detail of information that she had given the police.
Christine receives one final visit from her old friend.
And she was smiling, and she had found happiness, and she seemed to have, she was a different person than I'd seen 18 years earlier. I felt very happy that she had found peace, and I sort of felt sad, because I felt like this was closure all around. Jackie was gone.
This extraordinary relationship had spanned nearly 2 decades.
She was very, very special. She'll be always a very special part of my life, one way or another.
Birmingham, England, January 2002. A young man vanishes. Police think he's a runaway, but a psychic has a vision of a brutal murder.
His head was pushed down and he had a blow to the head. He's describing this as if he's watching himself. He's also shown me that he's been buried underwater.
Can she convince the cops a killer is on the loose and put him behind bars? Or will the mystery surrounding this young man's disappearance remain unsolved forever?
It was really horrific. It was frightening.
Birmingham, a bustling city in the heart of England and a centre of business and finance. But like any major city, Birmingham has its problems. Over 23,000 violent crimes were committed last year. Detective Daly is a cop whose job it is to catch the culprits. But when good old police methods fail to find missing local man Mark Green, it's to this woman, Diane Lazarus, that she turns. Diane Lazarus is a psychic, and today she's in Birmingham to help Detective Daly solve the riddle of Mark's disappearance. The story starts here in January 2002. 31-year-old Mark Green is out with a friend in the city centre. When he doesn't return home, his parents begin to worry.
They called the police quite soon after the concerns became quite concrete, and they reported Mark as a missing person.
Detective Marcella Daly is placed in charge of the missing person inquiry.
Mark was a 31-year-old man that came from the Stetchard area of Birmingham. He was a lecturer at a local college in art and design. He had a great bunch of friends, two very loving parents and a very good supportive family setup.
Mark's disappearance sends shockwaves through Birmingham's gay community. No one can understand why he would go missing or where he would go. Detective Daly's first task is to interview Mark's friend.
Mark's friend wasn't treated as a suspect as such, however, he was a vital person within this missing person investigation, and he held vital information, and he was incredibly supportive towards the investigation.
He tells officers what happened on the night in question.
The night that Mark disappeared, he went out with some friends, decided that he was going to go on to another club, and his friend took the bus home. Mark was last seen alive on the 17th of January, outside, actually leaving the nightclub called Kudos in Birmingham city centre. He was seen leaving through the main doors, and then he was later seen just outside by CCTV.
There are tens of thousands of closed-circuit television or CCTV cameras in Birmingham, but unfortunately Mark is only seen by one. Police make appeals on local radio for information about Mark's disappearance.
You're listening to Birmingham City News. It's Monday, the 28th of January. West Midlands Police are launching an appeal for information relating to the disappearance of 31-year-old college lecturer Mark Green. Mark was last seen in the city centre on Thursday evening. There is concern for his safety and police...
But no new information comes forward. In desperation, Detective Daly hits the streets and begins interviewing hundreds of potential witnesses.
Hi. Can I just let you have a look at that, please? It's a missing person inquiry. This is a missing person inquiry. This is a missing person inquiry. Missing person inquiry. Have you seen this person at all?
No, I haven't.
Have you seen this person at all?
Not at all.
Can I just give you that? OK, thank you. There was obviously contact with a range of friends, and also friends that perhaps he had lost contact with. There was also contact with other areas that he'd been to in his life, whether it be university or friends that he'd visited. There was nobody that came to light that would have any need or intention to hurt Mark in any way.
The police are baffled by the case. It seems Mark just disappeared into thin air. For Mark's parents, waiting for news of their son is heartbreaking.
Anne and Don Green, throughout this investigation, were incredibly brave and have my utmost respect. It's very difficult to actually wake up every day knowing that your son's not there, and nobody can find him and nobody can explain whilst he's not there.
It's now been 2 months since Mark went missing. Over 150 miles away in Wales, psychic Diane Lazarus is holding a private séance for a woman called Myron Green. She wants to contact her daughter who died the previous year.
The reading is taped for you, just in case his message is passed on for other people. And not only talk about you, I talk about your family members as well.
Diane's séances are incredibly detailed. To help her clients remember what is said, she records everything to tape.
I've got a young lady coming through called Sian, and I feel that she passed over in an accident. She's saying that she loves you. She's now bringing in a gentleman called Mark. She's putting her arm right around him and bringing him forward. And she's saying that he's definitely passed over.
Diane thinks that the man is Mark Green. She didn't know that Mark is Myron's nephew or that the police think he's a missing person. Was he in fact dead?
I hadn't heard anything about Mark Green at all, in all honesty. You know, the first I heard of Mark was literally through doing that reading.
Yes, this is definitely a gentleman called Mark.
But that's my nephew, and he's only missing. He's not dead.
I remember Myra was literally shaking her head saying, no, you can't have him. So I went in to describe Mark.
He's got brown hair. He's got a lovely smile. He's saying he likes art. He's also shown me steps towards a college, so I feel he worked in a college. He showed me he used to carry a rucksack. He was always in a rush.
Well, that's my nephew. He's a lecturer, but he's not dead.
He's definitely passed over in the spirit world. He's quite distressed because he's saying that
Diane's description is so accurate, Myron has no choice but to believe. She's very upset, but worse is to come.
Mark is telling me that he's not missing. He has not walked away from his parents. He's quite distressed because he's saying that he's been murdered.
I don't think for 1 minute that she expected this to happen, simply because she thought she was coming for a reading, she might have a message from her daughter, but she was really taken back by the fact that I had Mark in front of me.
Diane describes what she believes happened to Mark on the night he disappeared.
He's saying that he went to a nightclub, and as he walked from there, he was attacked. He's saying that he had this nasty blow, something really heavy hit him at the back of his head. He's saying that he's buried underwater.
And then went on to say that it was a lady that's going to help solve the case. It was a lady that was short hair, nice eyes. He also mentioned there was going to be a television appearance, and after that,
the crime will all be solved.
But is Diane right? Has Mark been killed and buried underwater? Were the police wrong in thinking he is just missing?
Myra was really taken back. I remember seeing her slumped in the chair, just couldn't believe what I just told her. And she said she was shaking with this tape in her hand, saying, I know what I'm going to do with this tape. I'm going to pass this on and get it to the police.
The next day, Myron sends the tape recording of Diane's séance to the police. It lands on Detective Daly's desk. But will it convince her that Mark is not a missing person?
Mark is telling me that he's not missing. He's been murdered.
Detective Marcella Daly is in charge of the missing person investigation.
I think on hearing the tape, my feelings were a little bit mixed at first. It's a very difficult thing to kind of listen to, but I thought it was important to remain open-minded.
He's saying he's got jeans on. He had a denim jacket on at the time that he was murdered.
She came up with information with regards to location, interesting information connected to Mark's parents, but she also came up with information with regards to me, which was quite surreal, really.
There's a police officer, a lady. She's got short hair, lovely eyes.
And she described me as a key figure in the investigation.
On the tape, Diane can be heard describing Mark's appearance, his movements that fateful night. She tells of a blow to the back of the head and a burial underwater.
There were some elements that weren't what perhaps you would call guessable. You know, there was some information, some factual information with regards to this inquiry that we purposely kept out of the media. And Diane had touched on a number of these points.
Detective Daly asks Mark's parents permission to contact Diane.
Approaching Alan Don about the information in the tape was a little bit difficult, but they felt like any information that was coming through on Mark, that it really needed to be looked at.
I had a phone call then from the West Midlands Police, Marcella Daly, and she was asking me, how do you know about Mark's murder? How do you know all these details? There's no way you could know all these details. She was very much taken back as well, and I felt I was being really questioned, big time. So I just answered as best as I could and tried to explain that I'm not a crackpot. Mark is in the spirit world, and he's given me the information.
got very good vibes from speaking to her, and she seemed genuine and very supportive to what she wanted to help, and she agreed to come down to Birmingham to meet me.
I was really nervous when I was invited up, but pleased as well, because I felt I'm going to get closer to this. I'm going to help Mark to hopefully find his body and deal with it.
The involvement of a psychic medium was completely new to me, but she had vital information with regards to Mark's disappearance that really I couldn't afford to ignore.
Detective Daly decides to team up with psychic Diane Lazarus. She takes her to the place where Mark was last seen alive. Can she make a psychic connection with Mark and help convince Detective Daly that he has been murdered?
She felt a very strong feeling to walk in a particular direction, and that direction was actually supported by CCTV footage of Mark, and in fact it was actually the last footage that I had of Mark.
The CCTV here, just that one there, we've actually got a picture still of Mark just standing here actually chatting to somebody. We don't know who that person is and they haven't come forward.
I could literally see Mark ahead of me and he's saying, walk this way.
Diane believes that Mark is guiding her and Detective Daly along the route he took the night he disappeared.
To him. Mark literally showed me in great detail which way to walk.
Just want to go straight down here.
Okay. We said take a left here, take a right here.
Because to me, he's coming through really distressed at this point. And he keeps taking me as if he wants to sort of drag the both of us down this area all the time.
Quite clearly I had an understanding of where Mark had gone, and Diane, without having that information, walked that route, and I followed her and listened intensely to what she had to say.
I don't feel he was alone. Somebody else was with him, and this guy that I feel is certainly not a friend that's with him at this point. It's as if he was staring Mark out. I kept looking at him, staring at him. It's as if he wanted me to see into his eyes, and I felt as if I was drawn into this guy's eyes. And he said, can you see what I've seen?
Walking with Diane as she was talking about how Mark was feeling, providing this information, it was quite unusual. Certainly the trained detective in me that was very much used to dealing with factual information was still remaining very open-minded. I didn't disbelieve her.
I was pleased by Marcella because she questioned a few times, but she took in all the information that I gave her, which was brilliant. And she accepted what I was saying. She didn't try and sway me anyway. She said, do you think he was here? How do you think he looked? Which way did you describe him? You know, all the right questions she should have been asking, really.
After 5 hours walking, Diane Lazarus and Detective Daly arrive at this housing estate in Birmingham's Highgate district.
This is definitely it, definitely.
And I remember actually getting to some flats, and he kept saying, Diane, here, this is the place.
The psychic connection is now stronger than ever. Mark begins to reveal the full horror of what happened to him that night.
He was really hitting him and beating him up. When Mark was pushed down and kept being pushed down, he had a blow here, right there, the back of his head. The impression he keeps giving me is that his head was put down.
But police have no information to suggest Mark would ever come to this area of Birmingham. He didn't have any friends here, and it's miles from his home.
It was really horrific. It was frightening. When I was actually standing there and hearing this information, it was unbelievable. I was looking in thinking, you know, where are you, Mark? He kept saying, you're not going to find me here. You're close. You're not going to find me here. But I'd been taken away. And I could see black bags being laid out. It was terrifying. For me, even, I was in a right mess and I felt awful. And I thought, these people are going to think I am nuts to say these things to them now.
But the walk has a dramatic effect on Detective Daly. Her growing suspicion that something sinister had happened to Mark is now confirmed. She decides to upgrade the missing person case to a murder case. Diane Lazarus has done her job. It's been several months since Mark Green was first reported missing from home in Birmingham, England. With the help of psychic Diane Lazarus, police are now treating his disappearance as murder.
Because also some supportive information on the tape, as well as a very intense investigation. The decision was made quite quickly to upgrade the investigation to a murder investigation.
It's incredible, but a tape recording of a séance is being used by police to catch a killer. Using information provided by Diane Lazarus, police begin to search whole new areas of Birmingham.
Diane provided particular information with regards to locations and areas and materials that she felt were important, and that information formed part of my searching of areas.
It's an agonizing time for Mark's parents.
The waiting for Mark's parents was just completely devastating. Not only Mark's parents, but obviously key family members, and also Mark's partner at the time. And there's just no way of actually describing how completely devastated they were as every second ticked by, really.
But despite their best efforts, the police find no evidence of Mark.
It was very frustrating for me as the main officer in the investigation, not to find Mark when I felt so committed to finding Mark.
It isn't just Detective Daly who's growing frustrated.
The length of time that Mark was sort of waiting for this case to be resolved, it was actually frustrating for Mark. But in that time, I actually did his mum a reading and his dad. And Mark actually told me that there'd be a television programme, and after that television programme, the whole thing would be actually solved.
This is the second time psychic Diane Lazarus has said a TV show will lead to the crime being solved. The first time was during the séance over 5 months ago.
When Diane spoke on the tape, she mentioned the use of media, a wide range of media, but also that we'd be attending a TV show.
Incredibly, in May 2002, Detective Daly is called and asked to take part in a talk show.
There's going to be a television programme.
With Diane's words ringing in their ears, she agrees to take part.
I certainly felt with regards to Mark Green that we really could not afford just to ignore it. I felt I had to justify to the inquiry, and felt I had to do it for the parents.
And Marcella rang me and said there is going to be a television programme, and I was really taken back. I remember watching it and thinking, it's not going to be long now.
A very unusual step, but I felt it.
During the programme, Detective Daly is criticised for using a psychic in the investigation.
This was a real help.
It enhanced the investigation.
Yeah, I noticed you used a very kind of careful word there, enhanced.
It was quite critical of the approach that I had personally taken with the use of clairvoyance mediums. What I stress and what's important for any family that's considering this, that there are lots of people out there that will take advantage, quite clearly, but there are still people out there that have talent and do want to actually help people when they're in such a vulnerable state to find missing loved ones.
The broadcast comes as a shock to one man in particular. Scared that the police are closing in, he decides to save himself and step forward with information about Mark's disappearance.
A person called James came forward and basically provided information to say that his brother was responsible for the murder of Mark. And that he was responsible for helping his brother dispose of Mark's body.
I was pleased that this gentleman had walked into the police station and obviously said that he'd been involved in committing the crime, because it's exactly what I'd said. I said there was going to be a television programme, and from that moment on, I knew somebody was actually going to own up to it, so to speak.
Incredibly, Diane was right. A television show has brought a killer to the surface. But what did happen to Mark on the night he disappeared? And where is he now? James's brother, Robert McMahon, is a neo-Nazi with a history of violent crime. Police arrest and charge him with the murder of Mark Green. But despite intense questioning, Robert refuses to confess to the killing, but James does talk. He tells police that Robert killed Mark on the night of January 17th in his flat in the Highgate district of Birmingham, the exact location Diane led Detective Daly to months earlier.
I remember Marcella giving me a call up and saying that the place where I'd taken her was actually a spit away from where Mark had actually been murdered. So it was well worth going up to Birmingham and taking that walk.
Before this case, Diane Lazarus had no connection to Birmingham. There is no way she could have known either the area or Robert McMahon. So how did she come so close to the murder scene?
Weeks before, months before, I was standing in the spot thinking, I can't be in the right place, no way. And yet, that information was brilliant.
Sometime after the murder, Robert McMahon takes Mark's body by taxi to his brother James's house in Coventry, 50 miles away. With James' help, they bury him under a pond in the back garden, just as Diane had seen in her horrific vision months earlier.
When I found out that Mark's body had been buried under a water feature, it was just unbelievable. It just proves that Mark's detail was so phenomenal, really.
On June 7th, 2003, a forensic archaeologist is brought in to excavate the site. As each layer of soil is carefully removed and analyzed, a body is discovered. 12 hours later, human remains are exhumed. After forensic tests are complete, the body is identified as Mark Green and the cause of death is finally revealed.
When Diane described how Mark had been murdered, and when Mark's body had been found and forensic information came to light, it was quite factual that Mark had been killed to a blow to the back of the head.
When I found out that Mark had died from a blow to the head, it was confirmation for me that Mark was giving me the accurate information at all times.
How did Diane Lazarus know where Mark was killed, the cause of death, a blow to his head, and that he was buried underwater? The information she gave to police is all well documented and far too accurate to be guesswork. Diane has only one explanation. Mark told her.
I really feel I've got a duty to the spirit world because I feel I'm employed by them, so to speak. So when I'm given information, I really try and act on it straight away.
At their trial, it takes just 1 hour for a jury to find both McMahon brothers guilty.
Robert was sentenced to life for the murder of Mark Green, and his brother James was sentenced to 2 years for helping dispose of the body of Mark Green. I think Mark's parents had basically been to hell and back with Mark's disappearance and murder. I think the case, when it came to an end and when the two were found guilty and sentenced, was a relief to both Anne and Don. But again, it just re-emphasised the great sadness and the great loss in their life.
But why did Robert kill Mark? Was it because he was seen leaving a well-known gay bar? Was this a homophobic attack? Or was he just in the wrong place at the wrong time? If this was just a random act of violence, would police have solved this case without Diane Lazarus' information? One thing is certain, Diane's prediction that a TV show would lead to the crime being solved did encourage Mark's normally reticent parents to appear on TV with Marcella Daly. Without that show, James McMahon may never have come forward and given evidence against his brother, Robert.
I think Diane was helpful in solving this case. She certainly enhanced the inquiry and provided information that led to a number of lines of inquiries and obviously with the end result of finding the people that were responsible for Mark's murder.
To this day, Diane says that Mark still appears to her. She feels he is one of her most trusted spirit guides.
He still comes through, I still have conversations, and he's fantastic, actually.